Today we are talking about Herelink, and we're going to take a look at the new firmware update that brings a whole host of improvements and features to this system. Now, I did do a little bit of a sneak peek on this update a few months back. However, the update has now been released and it is available to download for the Herelink system. Now, this is quite a big and important update because not only does it bring some new features, it has some real important improvements on the behavior of the device itself. Now, what we're going to do in this video is walk you through what the changes are in this firmware. Then I'm going to talk you through some things you need to know before updating, quickly walk you through the process, and hopefully get you up and running with this new release. So, to look at what's actually changed. Now, this update is a mixture of system improvements and new features. There are some major changes here in this firmware, and there are some really interesting new features added as well. Talking about the system side of things, first of all, they have improved the RC backend to ensure that the failsafe behaves as it should, and they've also increased the resolution of the control sticks on Herelink, giving a much more linear and smoother response compared to the previous updates. They've also improved the screen resolution DPI to ensure both your apps look as they should, as well as the camera view looks right as well. Alongside the system updates, there are some pretty big major new features here as well. For instance, we have a new trainer mode as well as dual operator mode for Herelink. This allows you to connect a second Herelink device to the main one via Wi-Fi to either use it as a trainer or use it like a traditional dual ops mode. That means you can now have a separate camera operator when using your Herelink and allowing you to do two different things at the same time. Alongside this, you also have updates for the Q ground control as well as Solex apps, bringing in some little improvements as well. We have a new over-the-air update feature for the air unit, which allows you to actually update that now via the ground station rather than having to update it via USB, and we will talk a bit more about that specifically later on. They've also now brought back the settings screen for the radio system, and that screen that used to be in the Q Ground Control app has now been moved into Herelink settings, and from here it allows you to control things such as the frequency of the system, as well as change the upload and download bandwidth and turn on and off frequency hopping. There are also a couple of other little changes as well, including the option to configure the home button, as well as change the options on the scroll wheel to add an incremental option rather than the traditional remote option. Now, these are the features that are live in this update today, but there are also a couple of extra ones coming in the future as well. These include dual video stream support. That means you will be able to do picture-in-picture style behavior with the Herelink system as well via the two HDMI ports. And there's also an option coming that will allow you to bound your ground station to multiple air units, and rather than actually have to rebind every time, you'll be able to select it from a list of air units on the system too. Now, alongside these, there's also been a couple of bug fixes in the system too, as listed on the website, and I will put a link to that in the description of this one as well. And from there, they actually walk you through all of the info that I've put in this video too. Now, there are a few things you need to be aware of both before doing this update as well as afterwards. Before doing this specific update, you will still need to update your air unit via USB. That is, if you have not installed the version of firmware that released in June. After performing this update, you will then need to update the air unit via the OTA function, because the initial update gives you the OTA functionality, and the latest update is then available via OTA. So what I will say to you is this: if you don't have the OTA option currently, you will need to update the air side via the USB and flasher, and we will talk about that and how to do that a little bit later in the video. Then once you've done that, you will then need to go into the OTA option and then update it to the very latest firmware. Then all future updates should be done via the OTA. after updating this firmware, it's possible you will need to rebind your air unit to your ground station, and you also may find that your sticks don't work correctly either. Now, it is imperative after doing this update as well that you would perform a full set of calibrations on the Herelink sticks. Because of that change in resolution, the overall behavior has changed, and you need to make sure that you do a calibration before you try to use it. You may find that you get no output at all from the Herelink sticks after doing the update. That is absolutely fine. You simply need to perform the calibration. Now, I will also walk you through a step-by-step on how to do that later in this video, because some people have found it a little bit confusing. So if you're not sure or you are having trouble on that, do check out that bit specifically. Anyway, let's take a look at how to actually do this update first of all. Okay, so to update the ground station, what you need to do first of all is make sure it's connected to Wi-Fi, go into settings, scroll down to the bottom to about phone, then click on system updates, and then you've got the check for update option in the bottom right hand corner. It will then present you with the update option. You simply press the button, let it download the update package and let it install it, and make sure that as you're doing this you don't disturb it. Let it do it via the Wi-Fi connection and just leave it do what it needs to do. Now, as the update progresses, you will find that your Herelink will reboot. That is absolutely fine, perfectly normal, don't worry about it. And once the update has finished, it should then come back up to the standard home screen where you had it before. Now, to update the air end, you still need to do this via USB at this point. As I mentioned, this firmware does have that new over-the-air update feature, but that won't work until after this firmware update, and that will work with future versions. However, at this point, you will still need to do the update via USB. Now, if you've never done this before, the best way to do this is go to docs.cubepilot.org, go down to the Herelink user guides and click on how to update firmware. Here you will find the instructions on how to update both the air end and the ground station, and here you will find the files you need to download to install the flasher file. Now, depending on your system will depend on which file you need to download. So for instance, Windows users would select flasher_win. You have flasher_mac for Mac users, and then a Linux version for those guys. Now, below this, there is also a video that walks you through how to do the update that I made some time back. In this video, I do actually show you the process of updating the Herelink firmware, how to connect it to USB, and then what you actually need to do on your computer to make sure that you run the file and it actually performs the update for you. I will also put a link to this video in the description of this one as well, so you can find it should you need to follow the process. Now the USB update part is done, we now need to update it via the over-the-air option to make sure that the air unit is on the latest firmware. If you open Herelink settings and go across to the air unit tab, you will find this new screen that gives you the options to download, transfer, or update the air unit. It will show you the version, the online version, which is the latest firmware available, the local version, which is the version that is on your air unit, as well as the IP address and some other info. Now, to perform this update, you simply follow the 3-step process. For instance, the first thing you do is tap download air firmware, and that will download it via the Wi-Fi on the ground station. Then you transfer it to the air unit, and this will send it over the airwaves via the Herelink data link to the air end, and then you finally tap the update air unit option and allow it to do it. Now, just be aware, this can take some time, so do make sure you have plenty of battery in your ground station as well as your air end when you are performing it. And when it's done, you simply tap the screen. If you then go back to, say, the radio screen and then jump back to the air unit screen, it will then synchronize, and it should show you that the versions of firmware actually match, showing you that you've got the latest version. And as I've said, it is important to understand that after performing that USB update for the first time, you do then need to go in and do this air end update. Now that you've finished the firmware update, it's imperative that you calibrate the joysticks and the wheel on the Herelink. You may find at this point your outputs don't work Don't worry about that, absolutely normal. What you need to do is go through the calibration process, and I'm going to walk you through how to do that now. So to calibrate the joysticks, the first thing you need to do is swipe down from the top, click on the Herelink settings app. In here, you will need to go into the joystick screen, and this will then let you calibrate the joysticks and the wheel on the device. Now, it's just worth noting, mine here is showing as calibrated, but yours may not. I have actually already done it on this one, but yours might show a little box showing red. If you find none of your sticks are working, that will be because these calibrations haven't been done. Now, we need to calibrate three things. We need to calibrate the hardware wheel, the hardware joystick cal, and then the S-bus outputs. So the first thing we're going to do is click hardware wheel, click start, and we're now going to move the wheel back and forth to its extremes, and you can see the values change either side, left side and right side, and then we're going to click complete when done. And to check that, we're simply going to move it, and you can see that it's moving, and that's absolutely fine. So we can then click pass. Now that we've done the first one, we're then going to click save to make sure that calibration is saved into the device. The next one we need to do is the hardware joystick calibration. Now, this is the main calibration for the sticks on the Herelink. When you first go into it, it shows you a screen with the instructions on what you need to do. Now, I'm going to walk you through this, but do take some time to read this because it's important you understand the bits that are working and are not as you're performing the cal. So we tap to continue, and the first thing we then need to do is click start calibration. Now, before we do this, it's worth noting this area here will not work whilst we are calibrating this part. The info you need to look at will be at the top of this area here. This area here will not do anything at this time. That is perfectly normal. So we're going to click start calibration, and you can now see two little red arrows have appeared next to the sticks. So on this, we're going to move the sticks left and right just to show you them as it shows on that little piece there. We're going to move it back to the center, click next. You can now see it says move the red pointers to the direction and center sticks. So we're going to move them to the top corners, move them back, click next. It then says move sticks along the red lines at least 5 circles. So what you need to do is go up, and we're going to move these around into 5 circles in a clockwise direction to calibrate the extreme areas of the stick. I've lost count how many times I've actually done this now, but I think we're past 5. So once we've done that, we'll return to center and click done. Now you will see when I move this, this area here starts to work. And you can now see some circles have appeared. And what this is allowing us to check the calibration has been done properly. So what we now need to do is follow what it's asking us to do with the sticks. So we're going to do there to the red circles. And then every time you do it, it can go over the circle. It will actually move it to another position. And this is to simply ensure your sticks are working as they should be. So you do need to get it right on the circle for a second or two. I'll come down to that one. That one. Once you've done that and all sticks are done and you've been able to do all of that on there, you then click pass, and that is then the hardware stick calibration completed. Again, we're going to click save to make sure that's set. Now there's one more calibration you need to do, and that is this one here for the S-bus outputs to make sure these correctly reflect. So to do this, you hit S-bus out cal, and you need to follow the little joystick options that you can see here. It's quite hard to see on the camera, but you need to follow what that is showing in that area there. So at the moment, it's showing left stick down. So we go left stick up, left stick right, left stick left, and then the same on the right stick. And then follow what it shows for the wheel. So we go right on the wheel, left on the wheel, and you can then see that it's now changed to calibrated, and it has saved. But what I'm going to do is click save again, and now those options are saved. Now, after doing this, your calibration should now be done and your joysticks should work as you expect them to. Now, what I'm going to do now is just jump in a little bit and show you a couple of things on this that are new on this firmware compared to the other one. So now that we've finished the calibrations, we now have all of the new feature options on this update. So for instance, you've got the channel modes, you've got the dead zone, the expo options for all the inputs, as well as the channel reverse options as well. In this firmware, there is also an option now for the wheel accumulator. So for instance, we've currently got the wheel set to channel 5. So if I push 5 that way, you can see channel 5 moves, and if I push 5 that way, it moves. And what you've got is the wheel input here, as well as the S-bus output here. So again, if I push it that way, you can see it moves. We now, though, have the wheel accumulator option. So if I press and click save, we can now actually use the wheel as an accumulator. So if I push it up, you will start to see that the S-bus moves, but it stays where you leave it. So you can now use this as an accumulator output and leave your channel output depending on where you let go, rather than it being a direct reflection of the position of the wheel. And you can then turn that on and off depending on what option you want. And if you want it back the other way, you simply turn wheel accumulator off, click save, and that's changed. We then, down here, have our dual cont option, and this is where we use our dual ops as well as our trainer options. So for instance, if I turn that on, you will then see it come up with the IP address, and this is the IP address of our device, and you can use this then on a second Herelink to connect via the dual ops or the trainer mode, depending on what you want to do. Now, a couple of other things I will quickly show you on this is the buttons. Under the button area, they have now added the option to be able the home button as a controllable button. So for instance, if I click on here and scroll down, you will now see home long and short press has been added to the bottom there as well. And you still have all of the options to set the profiles under here like you did before. Moving over to the frequency screen, and here is where you have the option to change the frequency output as well as the bandwidth settings for the Herelink. Now this screen is the same type of screen that was on the original firmware when it released in Q Ground Control, but they've now taken that out and moved it into Herelink settings. Now in here you have the options for setting the frequency, the bandwidth for the download, the bandwidth for the upload, as well as the antenna selection and frequency hopping. Now, something I will note is these numbers are not frequency. They are numbers that relate to a frequency on the system, but they are not a direct frequency. So 47106 is not the actual frequency the system is on, it's the channel number within the system. It is something I'm going to put together over time. I'm going to get a chart together to actually show what these represent, but these don't directly represent a frequency at this time. However, you can now set it into a manual frequency. So for instance, I can change it to that and you can see that it moves up. We can do things like get state, or we can do a frequency scan, which will scan the band for us as well. And then on the display, it's showing us in green the signal to noise ratio, the bandwidth that we've got selected in blue, and then the red is the current center frequency. So you can set it from there down to whatever you want to do. So I can keep going down and you can see it will jump up further up the band. We've then got our download bandwidth options. So you can either set it to 10 megs or 20. So for instance, if I set it to 20, it will then make it a larger bandwidth, or set it to 10 and you can see that it actually shrinks, and this is directly seen on the RF output as well. You then have the upload bandwidth options, which is the bandwidth from the system to the ear unit, and you can set this to 1.4, 10 or 20 meg. Finally, under here we have a couple of other options. We have the option to turn on and off frequency hopping, and that is if the system is going to automatically hop on video frequency. And you also then have the option for what antenna you want to be transmit, whether you want it to be left, right or auto. Finally, jumping over to the new ear unit screen, and whilst I have showed you this already, this is where you have the update options for the ear unit firmware via OTA, as well as a new option to update the apps independently from the system image as well, with the button at the bottom. As I've already gone through this screen, I'm not really going to go into too much detail, other than you've got that app button there, which allows you to do the updates, and that's something that will kick in the future. Now, overall, that's pretty much it. Personally, I do recommend everyone updates to this firmware. It is one of the bigger releases, and it does have some really important fixes like the improved stick resolution, the improved failsafe, as well as some nice features like the dual ops, as well as the ability to be able to update the ear unit in the future. If you do find this video interesting, please do consider hitting the subscribe button, and don't forget to hit the little bell next to it as well. If you'd like to support the channel, there are links in the description to buy me a coffee as well as Patreon. I am hoping to make a number of other videos on this in the near future around the dual ops modes and stuff like that. And if you do hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell. That way you'll get the notification when those ones are released. Anyway, that's it for this one. I hope you found it useful. Please stay safe, and I will speak to you all again soon.